As soon as the Muyu came out of the company, the rain poured down. It was only then that she remembered that her car had been sent to the mechanic for repair. Although she had become a senior executive of the company, she still did not accept the chauffeur arranged by her parents. She also lived in a separate 4-bedroom apartment outside. She liked to be quiet. She was usually at the company and often went on business trips. She was used to being independent. It's rare to get off work early, but the heavy rain left me with a few units. The Muyu wiped the rain off her forehead and called a taxi. Seeing that it was still early, she opened her umbrella and planned to go to the supermarket to buy some vegetables and fruits. Not long after she walked out, the Muyu was hit by a pedestrian in a hurry. Her umbrella was sent flying and fell on the lane. She quickly looked up and saw a little girl blocked by the umbrella she had dropped, so she could not see the speeding car. She was anxious and ran over to pick up the little girl. The moment she threw the little girl away, she felt her body become light and her entire body was sent flying. Her eyes were red. She saw herself lying on the ground covered in blood, and then her consciousness slowly dissipated. At the last moment, she suddenly realized that she seemed to be dead. The sky was a little dark, and the rain outside was very heavy, as if it was going to destroy the house. The Muyu had woken up for a while. She was a calm person. Even though the situation was strange, she analyzed the situation calmly. There was an obvious smell of damp straw in the room. The bed under her was hard, and the quilt was not soft at all. It was damp. She touched it for a while and found it rough. It was like the material used by poor people in China in the 70s, or it was a low-quality clothing bought online for a few yuan per piece. The room was very low, with only a small window on the right side of the bed near the door. The window was not made of glass. It could have been made of cloth or paper, so it did not let in any light. It was already night, and it was raining, making the room even darker. However, the entire house was tidied up very neatly. What made her feel uncomfortable was that there was someone lying beside her. Based on her feelings, it should be a man. The Muyu didn't dare to close her eyes. She was thinking if she should find an excuse. Just as she was thinking, a large amount of memories suddenly surged into her mind. 15 minutes later, the Muyu opened her eyes. She could not stop the shock in her eyes. She transmigrated? The original owner of this body was a married woman. Her surname was V, and her name was Yunlun. She was married to Chu Heng, the third son of the Chu family in Xingshui Village, Nanshan County. Chu Heng knew how to study. Ever since she married into the family, she did not need to eat the least and work the most at home like before. She also did not need to be scolded everywhere. The Chu family had split up, so Chu Heng spent most of his time studying in the county school, while she stayed at home to take care of the children. She only needed to grow her own vegetables, especially since she gave birth and her health deteriorated. The original body had 2 children. The eldest daughter was called Chu Ziluo. She was 8 years old this year and was already sensible. However, the original host let her do all the housework, but the little girl was still very obedient. After Chu Heng came back, she never complained. She also had a 5-year-old son called Chu Jin. He was spoiled by the original owner. He was especially generous and loved money. The Muyu frowned. She felt that this was a strange feeling, and she felt even more stressed. She had suddenly become the mother of 2 children. She could not treat them as she pleased. At the very least, she had to be responsible for their lives and raise them well. The Muyu quieted down after knowing the original body's memory. She tilted her head and glanced at the man beside her. It should be the husband called Shi Hang in the original body's memory. The original owner was 22 years old, younger than her previous life. The man beside her was about 24 years old and had already passed the scholar examination, preparing for the provincial examination in August this year. The Muyu knew that the ancient imperial examinations were very difficult and expensive. However, she was relieved that Chu Heng would only be back for 3 days. Today was already the second day, and he would be leaving tomorrow afternoon. It was also a chance for her to slowly adapt. Although the Muyu was calm, she was not used to being married to a stranger. It was just nice that Chu Heng was going to study. It would give her time to slowly familiarize herself with life here and accept the fact that she was already married and had a child. It would not be difficult. The Muyu fell asleep again as he pondered over the rain. 15 minutes later, in the courtyard, Chu Ziluo, who was dressed in a coarse, dark purple dress, was squatting beside a water tank. In front of her was a wooden basin for washing her face. Because it had rained, she had not been able to cover the water tank last night. There were many leaves, mud, and cobwebs on the eaves inside. As she removed the dregs from the water, she looked at the door of the main house hesitantly. When will Mother come out? If she doesn't come out soon, Father will be angry if there's no breakfast. What if he found out that Mother doesn't usually work? Just as the little girl was in a dilemma, the door to the main room suddenly opened. Shi Heng was dressed in a dark gray robe. His expression was calm, and on his well-defined, handsome face was a pair of sharp eyes that made people not dare to look him in the eye. Father? Father? See. Ziluo's voice was stuttering as she stood up abruptly. Her hands and feet were tied, and she blurted out anxiously, "Father, Mother will be up soon. She cooks, does the laundry, and takes care of us. Is that so?" Chu Heng was expressionless and his voice was not harsh, but it carried the aura of a superior. Chu Ziluo could not take it anymore. Her body shook even more violently and she almost cried. Chu Heng frowned and restrained his authority, saying, "You don't have to speak up for your mother." It was no longer raining, but there was still water in the yard. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked to the kitchen and walked down from the eaves. His shoes were soaked in the rain. He did not care at all. He stopped in front of Chu Ziluo and looked at her feet. "Since your shoes are broken, you can change them." When Chu Ziluo heard that, she looked down and saw her dirty shoes that were a little worn out. She quickly retracted her feet and looked a little terrified. "Father, I understand. I'll change it immediately." Chu Heng looked at his daughter's pitiful appearance. She had been bullied but did not dare to complain. Her courage had been affected by Madame the. He was angry that she did not fight for it. He also pondered whether he should let the child be raised by his mother. At least, he could not let her be raised by her. He recalled the events of his previous life. Madame the courted death and caused him to fail the imperial examination. In order to stand out, he had no choice but to enter the military camp to gain military merit. In the end, he managed to make a comeback and became a high official. Who knew that when he brought Madame Dioma to Jing City, she kept making mistakes and gave him a lot of trouble. For the sake of money, she even dared to take money from others. There were even rumors of her bullying the shop owners. She was so stupid that she was used by others and implicated the entire family. In the end, under the persuasion of his parents, he sent her back to his hometown, and he also raised her for the rest of her life. Unexpectedly, when he opened her eyes, he was back to the year of the provincial examination. Chu Heng was in a bad mood. In his previous life, he was tortured by his wife until he went crazy. He lived a solid life. Who knew that she would come back? "Where's the cloth I bought?" Chu Heng already had some doubts in his heart, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. "Granny." Granny took it away. Chu Ziluo looked at him carefully. Chu Heng's expression turned even colder, but he did not lose his temper at his own child. "Go and change your shoes first. Tell Lil Jin and your mother to get up." After Chu Heng finished speaking, he turned around and entered the kitchen. After a while, smoke came out of the kitchen chimney. Chu Ziluo's eyes were filled with shock. Father actually went to cook. It was over. Her father would definitely think that her mother did not do housework and she did not help her hide it. Once her father left, her mother would definitely be angry and not give her enough food to eat. Her mother would only buy meat for her brother and not her. Tittle lowered her head and looked at the small needle wounds on her palm. These were the injuries she got after making clothes for herself. Her hands had become slightly rough after working for a long time, and the pain of not being able to eat the delicious food made her regret it. If she had known, she would have gone to call her mother earlier. Worried, Tittle had no choice but to turn around and walk into the room next door. She pushed the door open and went in. She saw Tittle sleeping with his arms spread out. He was dreaming of something, and he was drooling. He looked as if he had no heart. "Brother, wake up. Father asked me to wake you up." Ziluo carefully nudged Tittle. Tittle was sleeping soundly on the bed and did not react at all. Ziluo could only muster her courage and push him again. "Little brother, get up quickly. If you don't get up soon, father will be angry." After pushing her a few times, Tittle was annoyed. He sat up impatiently and glared at her. "Ziluo, what are you doing? Can't you let me sleep well?" Ziluo's thin body was not intimidating at all in front of the slightly plump Tittle. She was trembling non-stop and was extremely timid. "Father told me to call you." "Father? Father is awake?" Shujin was shocked. He did not dare to shout at Ziluo anymore and hurriedly put on his clothes. Seeing that he was afraid, Ziluo heaved a sigh of relief and left the house. Standing in the courtyard, he clenched his fists and mustered up his courage before heading to the main house. He pushed open the door. Ziluo saw the woman sleeping on the bed and carefully walked over, gently tugging at her blanket. "Mother, it's time to get up." "Mother, father asked me to wake you up." Father has already entered the kitchen. The more she spoke, the softer she became. Her voice was trembling, obviously afraid. The Muyu woke up the second time Ziluo called out to her. She touched her forehead and felt a slight fever. She was also feeling a little dizzy. No wonder she slept so soundly. Thinking of his current situation, the Muyu only hesitated for a moment before slowly sitting up. In the room, there was only the thin and ragged girl in front of her. She knew that she was the eldest daughter of the original owner, Ziluo. She was very sensible, but she had always been enslaved by the original owner. At a young age, she had to take on all the household chores. As for the original owner, she found an excuse that her health was not good and refused to work. In addition, the couple mostly stayed separately. Heng, the male owner of the family, had to go to school and was not at home for a long time, so no one cared about her. Naturally, the original owner had the final say in the family. "I understand," the Muyu nodded with a gentle expression. Ziluo was a little nervous. Seeing that her mother was not angry, she quickly left and went back to her room to change her shoes. The Muyu could tell that although this child was young, she was very good at reading people's expressions. It could be seen how dignified the host was in her heart. The Muyu put on the clothes according to the host's memory. The weather was a little cold, so she put on more clothes. After changing, she felt a little tired and breathless. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead. How weak was her body, the Muyu frowned. If she did not take good care of herself, she might die soon. Although this life came randomly to her, she could not just watch herself lose her life. Besides, her sick body was really uncomfortable. There were 3 layers of clothes inside and outside. In order to prevent her stomach from getting cold, the Muyu even found a soft cloth and put it on her abdomen. The shoes were ordinary cloth shoes embroidered with flowers, and there were some stains on them. She thought that it would definitely get wet again when it rained outside, so she did not change. As soon as she walked out of the room, she saw a tall man carrying 2 black bowls as he walked out of the kitchen. The man was 8 feet tall, about 1.8 meters. His dark eyes made people dare not look straight at him. His expression was firm. He was a man in his 20s, and there was no trace of a scholar on him. The Muyu was confused. In her memory, her husband was not this serious. However, thinking about it, he only came back once every 3 months, so it was normal for him to change. The Muyu glanced at the bowl in his hand and said, "Let me do it." After saying that, she walked over and wanted to take the porridge from his hand. However, she did not move the man. He held the bowl tightly and looked at her coldly. No need. Siachu Hang walked past her and carried the porridge to the table in the central room. When he came out, he saw that Madame Vey was still standing in the same place with a frown. He laughed in his heart. This woman was used to putting on airs. He was no longer the Chu Hang from his previous life who was purely on the side of his family. Moreover, he already knew that she was not a good person. Naturally, he would not be deceived by her on the surface. The Muyu watched as the man went back into the room to serve the dishes. Her bright eyes glanced at him for a while, but she didn't say anything. She turned around and went into the main room. "All of you, sit down and eat." The Muyu looked at the 2 children and said softly. Si Uzaluo felt guilty, afraid that she would do something wrong and make her mother angry again. Si Ujin, on the other hand, was afraid of his father, Si Uheng. He was usually fearless. But when Si Uheng was at home, he did not even dare to breathe loudly. He was the most obedient. It could be seen that Chu Hong, the father, was usually a deterrent to the 2 children. Of course, in Chu Zaluo's eyes, she wanted to ignore her mother but did not dare to. She wanted to get close to her father but did not dare to. She became a pitiful little girl stuck in the middle. "Mother, when is father leaving?" Chu Jin asked softly. The Muyu glanced at him and said something seemingly unrelated. "When your father came back this time, he bought new shoes and books for you and new clothes for Zaluo." After saying this, she gave each of the 2 children an egg. She placed the pickled vegetables in front of her and the shredded pork and tofu in front of the 2 children. As for the plate of vegetables, it was in the empty seat beside her. It was obvious that she was going to give it to Chu Hang. The Muyu slowly drank the porridge. The pickled vegetables were very refreshing. She did not like to eat 2 greasy things in the morning. There were 4 eggs in total, 1 for each person. Chu Hang came in with the leftover noodles from last night. The noodles were not white at all, they were a little black. The Muyu knew that this was a kind of chopped wheat noodles. The texture was a little rough. It was not the kind of wheat noodles that had been refined in her previous life. This was obviously the crude food that could only be seen in the countryside. Chu Hang walked in and saw the dishes on the table. Seeing the Muyu pretending to only eat salted vegetables, his expression turned cold. "If you're willing to eat eggs, why would you only eat the salted vegetables?" These words were full of sarcasm. The Muyu frowned. Why was this ancient person so difficult to get along with? Chu Ziluo and Chu Jin did not dare to pick up any more food. They looked at the 2 adults carefully. "I have long hands, so I can pick up all the dishes." The Muyu replied casually, hinting that Zhu Yuang was overthinking. Sure enough, Chu Heng's face darkened. He did not say anything and buried his head in his noodles. However, everyone could feel the unhappiness emanating from him. The Muyu was very calm. She peeled the eggs for the 2 children and put them in their bowls. Under the surprised eyes of the 2 children, she said calmly, "Hurry up and eat." "See?" Zaluo realized that her mother had really said that, so she quickly buried her head in her food obediently. Chu Heng came in with the leftover noodles from last night. The noodles were not white at all. They were a little black. The Muyu knew that this was a kind of chopped wheat noodles. The texture was a little rough. It was not the kind of wheat noodles that had been refined in her previous life. This was obviously the crude food that could only be seen in the countryside. Chu Hang walked in and saw the dishes on the table. Seeing the Muyu pretending to only eat salted vegetables, his expression turned cold. "If you're willing to eat eggs, why would you only eat the salted vegetables?" These words were full of sarcasm. The Muyu frowned. Why was this ancient person so difficult to get along with? Chu Ziluo and Chu Jin did not dare to pick up any more food. They looked at the two adults carefully. I have long hands, so I can pick up all the dishes, the Muyu replied casually, hinting that Chu Heng was overthinking. Sure enough, Chu Heng's face darkened. He did not say anything and buried his head in his noodles. However, everyone could feel the unhappiness emanating from him. The Muyu was very calm. She peeled the eggs for the two children and put them in their bowls. Under the surprised eyes of the two children, she said calmly, "Hurry up and eat." Cecilio realized that her mother had really said that, so she quickly buried her head in her food obediently. After dinner, Sietui Heng put down his bowl and chopsticks. The Muyu had already finished eating. I'm going back to the old mansion later. For a moment, no one answered. Only then did the Muyu suddenly realize that he was talking to her. Okay, go ahead. Are you coming back for lunch? Yu Heng looked at her deeply, and without saying a word, he stood up and walked out. After Yu Heng left, he left the house. Chu Jin collapsed on the chair as if he had collapsed. He patted his chest in fear. Mother, when will father leave? He's too scary. Ziluo did not dare to speak. She stood up and started to clear the dishes. Put it down. You don't have to do this job. The Muyu noticed her actions and gently asked Ziluo to put it down. She stood up, took the bowl and chopsticks, and walked into the kitchen. There was still hot water in the pot. The Muyu washed the dishes with hot water and placed them in the wooden cupboard on the chopping board. After washing the dishes, she came out. Ju Ziluo and Ju Jin only reacted when she entered the central room again. Ziluo trembled as she stood in front of the Muyu. Mother, it rained last night. I woke up late this morning and didn't wake you up. I didn't do it on purpose. I got it. You don't have to wake me up in the future. Sleep more in the morning. The Muyu made Chu Ziluo feel even more insecure, and her eyes were still filled with fear. The Muyu did not say much. She believed that her elder daughter Ziluo's fear would slowly improve if they spent more time together. This would take a long time and could not be rushed. Mother, Ziluo was a little frightened. The Muyu's gaze was gentle, and so was her tone. However, it was hard to guess what she was thinking. She looked at Chu Jin and said, Lil Jin, isn't it time to practice writing? Mother, I don't want to practice writing. I want to invite Huzi and the others to go to town to buy candied haws. Chu Jin was afraid of Chu Heng, so he treated the Muyu more casually. After all, the original host doted on him and favored boys over girls. This was why Chu Jin was overly domineering, and Chu Ziluo was timid. The Muyu looked up. If you don't want to listen to me, then I'll ask your father to say it. The Muyu's voice was not forceful either. In fact, after saying this, she lowered his head and thought about his own matters. She wanted to make a pair of shoes. Other than Chu Jin, who had enough clothes, she only had 3 pairs of shoes. Chu Ziluo, the eldest daughter, only had 2 pairs of shoes. When she went to the old mansion, she would wear better shoes. At home, she would wear the worn-out shoes. The Muyu could not help but sigh at how many thoughts the original host had. How stupid! A lie that could be exposed with a casual question or a visit would make the original host appear extremely stupid and petty, and would even attract gossip. The Muyu stood up. Mother, why are you going? Mother? Chu Jin was shocked by the Muyu's words, while Chu Ziluo looked at her nervously. The Muyu said to Chu Jin, Go and practice your calligraphy. Your father should be back soon. Ziluo, come with me to get a needle and thread to make shoes. The Muyu left the central room and went straight back to the room where she slept. Although Ziluo was surprised, she did not dare to say anything and quickly followed her. Chu Jin did not want to write, but when he thought of Chu Heng, his father, he did not dare to resist, especially his mother's words. He was shocked and scared. He did not understand why his mother did not protect him. In the past, his mother would help him fake it. Chu Jin could not figure it out. No matter how mature he was only 5 years old. He knew that he could not get any benefits from his mother, so he could only accept the reality and return to his room to study. The Muyu brought Chu Ziluo to sit by the bed. She opened the half-size mahogany box on the bedside table. There was only half a foot of dark blue cloth left. If it was made into cloth shoes, it would not look good. The Muyu was silent. She remembered that the original host had sent all the cloth back to her mother's house. As for the original host's family, it was not a good one. The original host's father was lazy. Ever since she married into the Chu family, her mother would come to take some things from time to time. Speaking of which, it was interesting. The host had a good relationship with her parents and was willing to send the things back to her parents' house. Every time, Chu Heng brought back clothes, pastries, tea leaves, etc., most of them ended up in the family's warehouse. On the other hand, there was not much stock at home. The seemingly glorious scholar family was actually an empty shell. However, she felt that this was only the surface. Xu Heng, this husband, seemed to always have a barrier with the original host. Although he did not treat her badly in terms of food and clothing, the original host had never understood this husband. She did not know his preferences, nor did she know his thoughts. The Muyu recalled the original host's memories and felt that the reason was more real. Perhaps the original host's thoughts were simple, but Chu Heng, a scholar, had deeper thoughts. Mother, I still have some floral cloth left in my room. Seeing that the Muyu did not speak, Chu Ziluo tried to probe. She did not see any signs of anger on her mother's face. She did not even feel her mother's anger. This surprised Chu Ziluo, but she was also confused. However, she subconsciously felt that this kind of mother was really good. It would be great if she was not angry with her. Then go get it. All right, Chu Ziluo stood up happily. The little girl looked sallow and thin, but upon closer inspection, she had a pretty face and a pair of beautiful eyebrows. When she smiled, she looked like a quiet crescent moon. Go ahead. After Chu Ziluo left, the Muyu tried to recall the original host's memories. After a while, she stood up and walked to the desk. The desk was placed under the window, and on the left were 2 black wooden boxes. Those should be Chu Heng's clothes. She could move the top box, but Chu Heng had instructed her not to move the bottom wooden box. At the same time, it was also locked. Next to the desk was the room door. The courtyard of the Chu family was well built. It was a small courtyard with 5 rooms and 1 room. The room she was staying in was the front room of the right wing room. There was a guest room outside the courtyard, and next to the guest room was a woodshed. Opposite her room was Chu Ziluo, the eldest daughter's room. The room beside Chu Ziluo belonged to Chu Jin. Beside Chu Jin's room was a shed for mule carts, apart from the rooms on both sides. The resting room on the right side of the main room was used as a warehouse. Chu Heng had 8 paddy fields and 5 pieces of land under his name. According to the memory, one field was about 60 square feet, and the harvest was about 200 caddies of rice. With 8 paddy fields 1 year, the harvest was 1,600 caddies. Chu Heng was a scholar, so he had the tax exemption limit and did not need to pay taxes. However, he needed to give the tenant 40% of the harvest, and he would be left with 960 caddies or so. However, 100 caddies of paddy could only be used to harvest about 60 caddies of rice. In total, there would be 400 caddies of rice. Usually, Chu Heng was not at home, and only the original host and the 2 children were at home. They could not finish it at all. However, Chu Ziluo's daughter was sallow and thin. It was obvious that she did not eat her fill often. The reason was simple. The original host had sold half of the grain and exchanged it for silver to buy cloth for Chu Heng. She had never sent these pieces of cloth to her family. In fact, she had never mentioned it to anyone. She had only quietly given them to Chu Heng every year so that he would not be short of clothes. The Muyu thought about it and opened the wooden box. Sure enough, there were a few pieces of cloth in the box, mostly dark-colored. Chu Heng was a scholar, so he did not wear white. Therefore, it was appropriate for him to wear a green robe or a black and brown robe. Most of the commoners were wearing gray or white clothes. Chu Heng did not like to wear green. The original host knew this, so most of the clothes he bought for him were black or brown. After a moment of hesitation, she took out a black cloth. She found a pair of scissors, sat by the bed, and began to cut slowly. Chu Ziluo took the light-colored floral cloth from her room and carried the basket that she usually used for needlework. "Mother, there isn't much cloth left. We can only make 2 pairs of shoes." "It's enough." The Muyu picked up the cloth and looked at it. She felt that the color was not bad. It was light-colored, so it would look even better if she embroidered some patterns on it. However, when she picked up the needle and was about to embroider according to the original owner's memory, the Muyu felt that it was not smooth. Even if she knew how to do it in her memory, in reality, she had never done needlework before. Her face stiffened suspiciously. She looked up at Chu Ziluo and saw that the little girl was looking at her expectantly. The Muyu's face was a little red. "Ziluo, you should go first. I'll take a look at your skills." All right, Chu Ziluo did not dare to relax. On one hand, she felt that her mother must be looking for an excuse so she could make shoes. On the other hand, she hoped that her mother would see how capable she was. Would she like her after that? The little girl had a sensitive personality. She knew from a young age that her mother liked her son and not her daughter, but she still hoped that her mother would like her. In addition, her mother was very gentle today, so she hid her thoughts. The Muyu saw it clearly and smiled. In fact, timid girls were the easiest to teach. On the contrary, it was more difficult to teach her son, Chu Jin. However, the other party was still young and had the weakness of being afraid of Chu Heng as a father. She only needed to mention Chu Heng, and she would be able to subdue him. The Muyu watched Chu Ziluo thread the needles skillfully. She first made the soles of the shoes and then cut the fabric. The soles are too thin, so make them thicker. The Muyu looked at the shoes that she had made for herself. It was made from leftover fabric, and the soles were not thickened. "Mother, I'll waste too much cloth." Chu Ziluo felt even more uncertain. She felt that her mother was suddenly nice to her because her father was at home. However, once her father left, would her mother take back these shoes? However, she needed a pair of shoes now. The Muyu noticed the change in her emotions and could not hide the fear in her eyes. This child's thoughts were all on her face, so it was easy to guess. It was not that she was not good, but it was easy to be at a disadvantage when interacting with someone who had deep thoughts. "Your father bought the size of this shoe pad. Other than you, no one can use it. If you don't use it, it's a waste. Your father hates waste the most." Hearing the Muyu mention Chu Heng, Chu Ziluo could not help but shiver. She did not dare to refute, but she could not help but remind the Muyu softly. "Mother, my insoles can be used to make shoes for my cousin." This was the daughter of the original host's eldest brother. In the past, she did send many things from the family to her family because her eldest brother had left the army 6 years ago and never returned. Some villagers who went to serve in the army came back 3 years ago, but they were not in the same military camp as the Hao. However, most of the villagers in the other villagers had returned. Those who did not return were basically dead. The county's reply to the family was that the Hao was missing and no one knew if he was dead or alive. The compensation was also the least. Because of this, the old madam of the family went to the county government several times to complain. In the end, it was Shi Hang whom came forward and told the old madam that it was very easy for such a thing to happen to the young and middle-aged men who went to serve in the military every year. It was better to go missing than to be confirmed dead. At least, there was still a possibility of survival. Those who were reported dead had already lost their lives. Perhaps the old madam still had a glimmer of hope, so she stopped making a fuss. After that, the original host helped her family in many ways because of her brother's accident. However, she did not even take good care of her own child, making her daughter envious of her cousin. It was obvious that Chu Heng did not like the original host. This was the reason why he had lost his temper with her in the morning. However, she felt that the current Chu Heng seemed to be a little different from the original host's memory. She had to be specific about what was different. It seemed like he disliked this wife of his even more. Could it be that he had another woman outside? The Muyu raised her eyebrows. She felt that she had to find a way out for herself. With that thought in mind, she lowered her head and placed the shoe pad in Chu Ziluo's hands. I'm asking you to use it. Your cousin naturally has your grandmother to buy it for her. Chu Ziluo felt that her mother was too gentle, which made her feel uneasy, but she could not feel that her mother was angry. She accidentally poked her hand with a needle. Ah! Chu Ziluo cried out in pain. The Muyu grabbed her hand and sucked it with her mouth. She wiped it with the softest cloth beside her. I remember that there's medicine at home. Go and wipe it. I'll make these shoes. She did not want to reveal the traces that she was not good at needlework and let the little girl give her a demonstration. Who knew that the child was too young and could not control her strength? Even if women in ancient times started learning needlework and embroidery at the age of 5, they would learn it slowly. The Muyu took out the needles and started to do it herself. Her movements were a little slow, but coupled with her meticulous and intelligent personality, she was able to get started. At least, the young lady in front of her did not see any signs of her hands being rusty. Ziluo? Mother, my hand is fine. See you. Ziluo quickly waved her hands, wanting to fight for it. The Muyu saw that she was obviously too sensitive and decided to divert her attention. Your father went to his parents' house. Go and ask when he will be back. Mother, should I go? Seeing the fear in the little girl's eyes, the Muyu had a headache. This child was afraid of both her mother and father. She was too timid. Go and see your grandparents while you're at it. The Muyu's tone became a little harsh. Chu Ziluo quickly stood up. She did not dare to let the Muyu say it again and quickly went to the Chu family's house. The Muyu's mouth twitched slightly. He watched Chu Ziluo leave. In the main room of the Chu family's main house, Madame Sihu Liu looked at her third son and frowned. Are you sure you want to do this? Mother, I've thought about it for a long time. Help me inform the clan about this. Chu Heng's expression was calm, but his dark eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. In the end, he hardened his heart and planned to eliminate the mistakes that would happen in the future from the root. But Madame did not make a big mistake. If she only said that she would help her family, which family's young lady would not do this? Mother, you don't understand. She closed his eyes and said no more. Just treat it as if it's for my future. Don't worry. I'll make sure she doesn't have to worry for the rest of her life. If you want to divorce, you have to see if Madame agrees. Madame Liu did not understand why her third son would do this, but he was stubborn. If she said more now, he might not listen. She could only agree while looking for an opportunity to persuade the two of them. The Chu family's old master frowned as he asked, "Are you sure? If you really want to do this, then I'll let the clan know that while you're only a scholar now, it's still reasonable for you to get a divorce. If you get into the high scholar examination and have a flaw in your reputation, it won't be good. Father, I've thought it through. I won't tell my family for the time being. I'll let the clan know so that they won't be too surprised. Hearing this, Madame Liu could not help but say, Chu Heng, the one who will be affected the most by this matter is you. You really. Madame Liu still wanted to persuade him, but Chu Heng's attitude was already firm. He didn't want to say anything more and only said, Mother, when I leave tomorrow, bring the 2 children over. I'll go back and read my books first. Chu Heng strode away. Madame Liu turned around and saw that the old man was still smoking. She could not help but say anxiously, Old man, are you really going to agree to this? Do you think we can stop it? His words were clearly prepared for a long time. He even thought about the clan. If we don't agree, it would cause trouble instead. In short, he let Madame down in this matter. During this last period of time, treat her well and help her plan a way out. Sigh, what's going on? Moreover, I can't tell anyone. I'm so anxious. Madame Liu really did not agree to this. Although Madame V was not the best daughter-in-law, how could they get divorced over such a small matter? Besides, Chu Heng already had 2 children. How are they going to get along with each other in the future? Wait a minute, Chu Heng said that he will never marry again after the divorce? Madame Liu's eyes widened, and she could not help but mutter, I'm afraid that the couple is having a conflict. No matter how you listen to these words, they sound like a joke. Yu Jiwan exhaled a mouthful of white smoke. He couldn't figure it out either. Then let's stabilize it first. Madame Liu nodded her head and did not spread the news for the time being. Father, you're back? Zililo had only walked halfway when she met Chu Heng, who was walking back. She greeted him softly and waited for Chu Heng to walk over. She quickly followed behind him. What are you doing here? Chu Heng asked. Mother called me over to ask when you're coming back. Zililo did not dare to hide anything and answered honestly. She came over just 'cause she asked you to? Hu Heng's face darkened. Zililo looked at him nervously, not knowing what to say. Seeing that the child was frightened, Hu Heng's expression returned to normal. He glanced at the shoes on her feet and said, Let's go home first. Chu Heng walked quickly, but because his daughter was following him, he subconsciously slowed down. He entered the courtyard. Chu Heng subconsciously looked at the master bedroom in the west wing. The window was half open, but he could not see what Madame Na was doing inside. However, when she turned around, she saw her son, Chu Jin, sitting behind the desk in front of the bed and writing. He was still muttering the 1,000-character script, but he made a few mistakes. Heaven, earth, black, yellow. The universe is in chaos. The sun and moon fill the west and the stars are arranged. Cold comes and summer goes, autumn harvests and winter hides. Shi Heng quickly walked to the door of Siha Jin's room in the east wing and said coldly, Sun and moon? Sun and moon surplus. No, it's the sun and moon. Siha Jin was startled by the sudden reprimand. He turned around and saw Siha Heng with a serious expression. His legs were trembling. Father, is this the book you usually read? How can you even misread the front part of the 1,000-character script? I can see that you don't usually work hard. Then copy it 10 times and hand it to me before you go to bed at night. Chu Heng ordered. After hearing this, Shi Jin felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth and was about to cry. Xing looked at him coldly. Every time you cry, write another one. Shi Jin's tears instantly disappeared. He did not dare to make a scene and could only continue copying the book obediently. 10 times was not much, but it was enough for Chu Jin to write for an entire day. Chu Hang turned around and did not see Madam the coming out of the room. He snorted coldly and turned around to go into the study to read. When the Muyu heard the voices outside, she only raised her head to take a look. She did not go and protect Chu Jin as Chu Hang had expected. Chu Jin was indeed spoiled. However, he was afraid of Chu Hang, so she could use him to change his personality. "Ziluo!" the Muyu shouted. "Mother, what's wrong?" Ziluo had just changed her shoes and walked out of the house. When she heard the Muyu's voice, she quickly walked over. The Muyu stood up. "Stay at home and look after your brother. If he doesn't study, I'll tell his father. I'm going to buy some meat." "Buy meat?" Ziluo could not help but gulp. The Muyu found all the money left behind by the original host. There were around 10 tailies. Although they could not eat meat every meal, it was not a problem to eat once every few days. She did not want to explain too much. She carried a basket and left. Jingshui village was very close to Nanshan County and there were many households living there. The conditions were not bad and the bridge was well built. There were 2 rivers at the edge of the bridge, and many houses were built by the river. Therefore, many girls and women were washing clothes on the stone steps beside the houses. The Muyu walked out and realized that Nanshan County should belong to the Jiangnan water town. Unfortunately, the original Muyu had never traveled far and did not know the specific boundary. She only knew that this dynasty was called Great Chu. Looking at the development of this dynasty, it should be different from any dynasty in her previous life. It could be seen that the history of this world was different from what she knew. The Muyu went to the village entrance to buy pork. When she was crossing the bridge, he bumped into a few women. The woman in the front, who was wearing a green dress, saw the Muyu and stopped in her tracks. She was very enthusiastic and reached out to hold her arm. "Isn't this the wife of a scholar? I'm Madam Xiao. Do you remember? I'm from Anling Village. I've met at your sister-in-law's house before." The Muyu recognized the other party. She was a famous matchmaker from a few nearby villages. They had bumped into each other in the Chu family's eldest son's house because her eldest niece, Chu Qingxiang, was talking about marriage. The Muyu took a step back and smiled. "So it's Madam Xiao. Seeing that you're in a good mood today, I think there's good news." "That's right, I found a good partner for your niece. He's also a scholar and got in this year," Madame Zhao said in a low voice. When the woman beside her heard this, she was a little jealous. "Madame Zhao, why didn't you introduce such a good young man to my young lady?" "Don't tease me, isn't your girl still young?" Madame Zhao did not buy it. When she saw the Muyu, she had a plan in her heart and wanted to deal with this unintelligent scholar's wife. It was for the sake of the new tax-free fertile land that would be added this year. The fertile land under the name of a scholar could be exempted from tax. Every year, a scholar had to take an annual examination. Those who failed the examination 3 times would lose their official rank. Not only did Chu Hung get the first place in the academy examinations at the age of 15, but he also got excellent marks every year. Other than receiving 1 tael of silver and 1 liter of rice from the government every month, there was also a tax-free amount. His amount was 3,000 square feet. Actually, after deducting the amount used by the Chu family, there was not much left. However, Madame Zhao thought that it was better than nothing. 240 square feet of fertile land could save 100 caddies of rice a year. Selling it would be a considerable income. Moreover, Chu Hang had a good reputation and had never stolen other people's fertile land, which was why Aunt Zhao had this idea. "Lady, in a while I will go to your big brother's house to matchmake. If you are free, you must come." It was not convenient for Madame Xiao to say it here, so she could only set a time. The Muyu answered ambiguously. "Auntie, please go quickly. My sister-in-law must be waiting anxiously." "That's true. Then I'll go first." Madame Zhao thought that if she could agree to this marriage, she would have a good relationship with the Chu family in the future. As she thought about it, She did not delay and left quickly. The other women had met Madame Xiao halfway and wanted to ask if there were any good candidates. Now that the main character had left, they greeted the Muyu and left one after another. Although the original host had a good reputation, no one dared to gossip in front of her. After all, she had the title of the scholar's wife, and no one wanted to offend her. However, the Muyu was thinking that she could not get involved in the tax reduction of fertile land. If Chu Hengyi wanted to trade for the quota, he would have done so long ago. Even the original host's maiden family did not get this benefit. Madame Zhao was really thinking too much. After taking 2 steps, she was thinking about something and did not notice that someone in front of her had bumped into her. "Ah, my dress." Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from her mouth. She stopped in her tracks to see what had happened. A beautiful woman in a blue dress sat in front of her. The rain around the street was still wet. There was water where she sat and her skirt was soaked. "I'm sorry." The Muyu realized that she had bumped into someone, but she was a little suspicious. She did not feel any impact, but the person in front of her was sitting on the ground. It's fine, sister. It's all my fault for not looking where I'm going." The woman stood up and waved her hand with a gentle expression. She was very understanding. "Ah, Ro, you are too kind. I spent 500 wen to buy this dress for you in the county. The shopkeeper of the shop said that this material is extremely precious and would have to be scrapped if it touches water too many times. I say, your family doesn't lack this bit of silver. You should pay for hitting someone, right?" An old woman appeared and threw the blame onto the Muyu in a few words. She even demanded compensation. The light in her eyes was obvious. The Muyu recognized the 2 people in front of her. The woman was called Tong Ro, and this woman was her stepmother, Madame Wang. The villagers all said that Tong Ro's stepmother did not treat her well. They said that Tong Ro was pitiful, but she was very sensible. She knew needlework, could read, and even knew how to draw. She was more educated than the girls in the village. So many young men expressed their feelings to her. However, the Tong family had high standards. They felt that Tong Ro was beautiful and was like the county's young miss. How could they be willing to let her marry a low person? However, for some reason, they never decided. Now, Tang Ro was already 18, but she still had not gotten married. Some people in the village started gossiping. However, it did not affect the Tang family's desire to find a good man for Tang Ro. "Madam Wang, your method of extorting people is not very clever. Everyone should have seen whether I bumped into you or not." After hearing Madam Wang's words, the Muyu was even more certain that she was getting scammed. Naturally, she did not feel guilty. "Sister, my mother. It's all my fault. It has nothing to do with you." Tong Ro gently nudged the Muyu while calling her to leave. At the same time, she pounced on Madame Wang, trying to stop her stepmother. The Muyu looked at the 2's passionate performances and felt like laughing. She really walked past the mother and daughter and left. Tang Ro and Madame Tang's expressions froze. Tang Ro was even more shocked. Why did the usually stupid Madame then not feel sorry for her? Madame Wang saw that the Muyu was really about to leave. Thinking of the Chu family, she gritted her teeth and pushed Tang Ro toward the Muyu, tearing a hole in Tang Ro's dress. There was a tearing sound. The Muyu could not dodge in time and staggered. Tang Ro had not expected Madame Wang to do this. She fell to the ground, just short of falling to the ground. Feeling the pain on her wrist, Tang Ro cursed Madame Wang her heart. However, she put on a front and asked weakly, "Sister, are you all right?" The Muyu was curious about what the 2 wanted to do. Madame Wang stood up and pointed at the Muyu. "Is this the wife of a scholar? It's fine if you didn't apologize when you pushed my daughter. Now, in order to help you, her dress is torn. You have to compensate her." The Muyu stood where she was, her expression unchanged. When she saw the villagers surrounding her, she said, "Sister Tang, didn't you say that you accidentally fell down?" It was your mother who was unreasonable and pestered me to compensate you for the dress, so I left. I was very grateful to you at first, but who knew that your mother would turn the blame on me?" When the villagers heard this, they came to a sudden realization. A woman who understood Madame Wang's personality said, "Madame Wang, you're too bold. You're even trying to extort someone from the wife of a scholar. Aren't you afraid that the scholar will send you to the yamen for punishment?" "That's right, Madame Wang, you're too obvious. In the past, it was fine if you were greedy for small gains. That was because we didn't hold it against you. This dress costs at least a few hundred coins. Are you crazy for money? What do you know? It was clearly Madame the who knocked down my daughter. This dress cost 500 coins to buy in the county. The shopkeeper said that this dress can't be worn if it comes into contact with water too many times. Madame the knock Tang rode down, so why can't she compensate us?" Madame Wang's heart ached for the dress. She had made up her mind to put the blame on the Muyu and make her pay. Otherwise, the money lost would make her heart, liver, spleen, and kidneys hurt. "Haha, Madame Wang, you're getting more and more funny. What kind of dress can't be washed? That's right. Don't tell me that you don't even wash your clothes." Madame Wang glared back at them. "You gossipy women, shut up. Even my foot-binding cloth smells better than your clothes. I don't care. Today, Tongro's clothes were dirtied and damaged by Madame the. She has to pay for it. If she does, I'll go to your CHQ family and make a scene. I'll see where you, the wife of a scholar, can put your face." Tongro's eyes were red with anger. Although she had discussed this matter with Madame Wang, she did not expect that the other party would completely disregard her reputation for 500 coins. The key was that Madame Wang was stupid enough to go along with Madame Ye's words. It was obvious that the villagers felt that Madame Ye's was wrong. It was only because Madame Wang was acting shamelessly that she had no choice but to agree. However, she could just ignore them. The CHU family had never been afraid of the Tong family. The Muyu noticed the slight change in Tongro's expression. She did not want to bother about this matter, but she had many ways to resolve it. However, Tongro seemed to have other thoughts. Instead of letting this person scheme against her in the dark, it was better to take the initiative and see what she wanted to do. When the villagers were angry and scolded Madame Wang, the Muyu said helplessly, "Forget it. Although Madame Wang has wronged me, I don't want to cause trouble for my husband. I'm the one who's going to make up for this dress." The Muyu did not want the villagers to think that she was easy to bully. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. She did not have the time to deal with these things every day. "Good, this is enough." Tangro spoke first. "Sister I'm sorry. It's all my fault." There was a deeper meaning to these words. Not only did it show that Tangro was innocent, but it also made the villagers even more convinced that Madame Wang had abused their stepdaughter. Madame Wang had completely ruined their reputation. "Mother, don't worry. I'll earn back the money for the dress." Tangro hinted at Madame Wang. Madame Wang was not satisfied with Madame Ye's compensation, but she could not get anything out of it. Seeing Tangro say this, she felt relieved. Before she left, she reminded her again, "If you're stupid and insist on putting in a good word for others, don't blame me for not giving you food if you can't give me these 500 coins." Tangro's face was bitter, but she secretly cursed Madame Wang for being stupid. After Madame Wang left, the villagers dispersed. Tangro smiled at the Muyu. "Sister I'm really sorry. I've implicated you in this matter. I'll go to your house later. I'll fix the dress myself." The Muyu raised her eyebrows. She did not say that she wanted her to go to her house, did she? Even if she had to compensate Tongru, she could give it to her directly. It seemed that the other party's goal was to go to her house. The mule already had a guess in her heart, but her face was extremely calm. She nodded lightly and said, "Sure, but I'll go buy meat first. I'll have to trouble you to accompany me first." Tangro's expression stiffened. Her dress was torn, so her pants could be seen. She could only hold the torn dress behind her and awkwardly follow behind the Muyu. The Muyu did not give her a chance to think of a countermeasure and walked straight to the pork stall at the village entrance. There were many villagers along the way. There were also quite a few young men who came back from the fields at noon. When they saw Tang Rose's appearance, they couldn't help but ask. The Muyu kindly explained to them. Feeling Tang Rose's resentful gaze behind her, the Muyu laughed in her heart. She did not even have the guts to plot against her? Uncle Ju, give me 2 caddies of meat with balanced fat and lean parts, and 2 caddies of fat meat. The Muyu did not like fatty meat, but the breakfast made her realize that in this era, there was no peanut oil and so on, and cooking was basically done with pork fat. All right, scholar wife, take the meat. 110 coins. Muyu counted the copper coins and handed them to the other party. Then, she took the pork and placed it in the basket. After buying the meat, Tang Roa was so embarrassed that she clenched her fists. Her expression was cracked. It was obvious that she couldn't maintain her calm. Let's go, the Muyu said calmly. She looked at the sky and realized that it might rain again. She couldn't help but walk faster. Tang Ro walked at the back, staring at the Muyu with disgust and unwillingness. She knew that Chu Hang would become a top official in the future, a famous chief assistant of the cabinet. Madame V was such a vulgar and stupid countrywoman. In her previous life, she could be a top official's wife even if she was courting death. Why could Tang Ro not? Unfortunately, she came back too late and her reputation was not good. However, compared to Madame the, in her previous life, she was much better. The Muyu did not know what was going on in Tang Ro's mind, but she felt that the other party seemed to be plotting something. She wanted to see what this person wanted to do. Chu Ziluo heard the sound of someone opening the door as soon as she reached her house. "Mother, you're back!" Ziluo saw the meat in the Muyu's basket. Her eyes flashed with surprise, but more than that, she was looking forward to it. Her mother had actually bought meat. "Mother, my brother asked me to call you over." Xiu still remembered the important matter and quickly whispered. How could the Muyu not know what Jin wanted to do? She walked into the courtyard and looked at Jin's window. "Liljin, after you finish writing, you will have meat for lunch." Jin's original intention to act shamelessly was instantly put to rest. Nothing was more important than eating meat. He stopped crying and continued to write those horrible black words with trembling fingers. "Sister, I can embroider the dress myself." Tang Ro followed her in. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her and Yu Heng was nowhere to be seen, her eyes flashed and she took the initiative to speak. "All right, I'll go get you a needle and thread." The Muyu entered the West Wing room, the room she slept in, and took out a needle and thread. She brought Tang Ro into the main room. "Take a seat. I'll go cook." "Sister, you can go. I won't trouble you." Tang Ro smiled thoughtfully. The Muyu came out of the main room and went into the kitchen. Chu Ziluo quickly followed her. "Mother, I'll help you light the fire." "No need. Go accompany the guests. There's tea on the table." "Oh, okay, Mother." Chu Ziluo stopped after taking 2 steps. "Mother, the tea on the table is cold." "It's fine, the guests like to drink it cold." "Okay, I'll go then." "Mother, if you need my help, just call me." Ziluo was very obedient and did not doubt the Muyu's words. The Muyu knew that Tang Ro was plotting something, so how could she patiently entertain her? He first boiled the meat with water. She did not know how to burn firewood, but since she had the original owner's memories, it was not difficult to do it. After blanching the meat, she scooped it out and placed it in cold water to cool it. She had chives and ginger at home, and she never liked to treat herself badly. She planned to make a serving of twice-cooked pork, minced meat, eggplant, and tomato egg soup. It was enough for the 4 of them. The Muyu methodically busied herself in the kitchen. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Tang Ro walking out of the room. Chu Ziluo was distracted. Seeing that she was only going back to her room, she did not call out to stop the child. Instead, her gaze fell on Tang Ro, noticing that she had walked to the study door. The study was in front of the kitchen, separated from the main room by an open room. If Tang Ro wanted to go to study, she had to go through the kitchen door. However, she could no longer see Tang Ro after that. The Muyu was shocked. So Tang Ro's target was Chu Hang. The original host's husband was good-looking and had the title of a scholar, so his status in this era was considered high, but there would not be an unmarried girl who fell in love with him and wanted to marry him, right? Daifoni had to know that in this dynasty, although scholars had the qualifications to use servants, they could not take concubines. Although there were a few who had a mistress, for the sake of their future prospects, very few scholars did so. At least, that was what the original host heard from Chu Heng. After all, if he could visit brothels, why would he have a mistress? It would be a negative impact on his future. Alt text. Moreover, the madams and young ladies also knew about this matter. Therefore, a married scholar would only want to get a mistress unless they were smart enough to forge iron. After all, an entry-level scholar's position was neither high nor low. Most scholars would never be able to move from the position for their entire lives. What future would there be for a mistress? Even Chu Heng, as someone who got the first place in the examination, logically speaking, had a high possibility of getting into the imperial examination. However, he had made mistakes twice during his exams. The first time was when he was 16 years old. On the way to the exam, he encountered heavy rain. After entering the exam hall, he had a fever and almost became stupid. Naturally, he did not pass that exam. The second time was when he was 19 years old. The day before he set off for the exam, he injured his arm and lost his qualification to take the exam. Speaking of which, Chu Heng was really determined. This time, after 2 consecutive incidents, he did not even have a chance to take the exam seriously. He could continue to persist in his examination and learn. As the Muyu was thinking, she heard footsteps and the kitchen door was knocked. She subconsciously turned her head and felt a shadow cast over her. Chu Heng's face was as dark as water as he glared at her. "What's the matter?" The Muyu hesitated. "Why didn't you tell me that outsiders were coming?" Chu Heng's voice was as cold as steel. "You're so stupid that you don't know anything but won't ask me?" It was the same in her previous life. She did not know anything, but she had the guts to not discuss it with him before doing things. When something happened, she felt that he did not care enough for her. Unreasonable, stupid as a pig. When Chu Heng thought of this, he became even angrier. He reached out and grabbed the Muyu's wrist. "Go and chase that woman away now. She's obviously trying to scam you, and you still believe her." Seeing that the Muyu did not answer, Chu Heng took a deep breath, controlled his anger, and changed his method. "This woman wants to scheme against you. Are you sure you want her to stay?" He had already made it so obvious. If this woman still did not understand, she would really be hopeless. The Muyu's gaze fell on his hand and said calmly, "Can you let go of my wrist before you talk? My wrist hurts from your grip." It was obviously a painful thing, but the Muyu remained calm. Chu Heng frowned. He was surprised by her reaction. It was completely different from what he had expected. He loosened his grip and said coldly, "If you still had a brain, you would know what to do. Don't think that you're the only smart one." The Muyu glanced at him and said this calmly. She rubbed her wrist and walked out of the kitchen to send Tang Ro off. After sending Tang Ro off, especially after seeing her reluctant expression, the Muyu regretted it. She should not have gotten involved in this matter. If Tang Ro really wanted to, she would have directly seduced Chu Heng and not affect her life. Now this man was angry. His face was dark, as if someone owed him money. The 2 children were trembling and did not dare to breathe loudly. They could not even eat properly. When the Muyu returned to the kitchen, Chu Heng had already returned to the study. She continued to cook as if nothing had happened. After finishing the dishes, she placed them on the table and called for the three of them to eat. It was very quiet at the dining table. Chu Heng sat at the head of the table, staring at the Muyu as if he wanted to see through her. The Muyu acted as if he did not exist and scooped rice for the two children before serving it to Chu Heng. Then, she was next. The dishes that she had made for lunch were very appetizing. The Muyu saw that the two children did not dare to pick up any food, so she directly used a spoon to pick up the food and put it into their bowls. Let's eat. Xie Ziluo and Xie Jin did not dare to say anything. They buried their heads in their food. The Muyu's actions made Xie Ziluo feel that her mother was very kind. She knew that Xie Ziluo did not dare to take the food, so she helped her. Xie Ziluo buried her head in her food and ate more meat. She noticed that her portion was the same as her brother's, but her brother's rice was less. Xie Ziluo was elated. Xie Heng was expressionless as he ate the meal, but he scoffed at the Muyu's actions. After dinner, he sat on the seat of honor without moving. The Muyu noticed his mood and asked the two children to go back to their own rooms. After the two children left, the Muyu said, "What do you have to say to me?" Chu Heng looked at her in surprise. He felt that Madame Thou was quite sensible today, so he restrained his anger a little. He tapped his fingers on the table gently. After 3 times, he said, "Mother will come over in the afternoon. After I go to the county tomorrow, the two children will be raised in the old residence first. Big brother's daughter Qing Sheng will look after them. Coincidentally, I asked Ziluo to go over and learn something. As for Chu Jin, he's usually too insensible. Although he's young, he's even good at writing and reading. Chubo is only a few months older than him." "You mean you want to send the two children to the old residence to raise them?" The Muyu's pupils constricted and her lips pursed. She felt that she might have misjudged the relationship between the host and her husband. Looking at Chu Heng's current actions, it was obvious that he was dissatisfied with the host for not teaching the two children well. If that was the case, her situation would be a little peculiar. "How long will they be there for?" the Muyu asked calmly. Chu Heng stared at her while the Muyu tried to calm herself down. After a while, Chu Heng said, "Send them over first." However, he did not say the exact time. The Muyu frowned. She was not stupid. In ancient times, it was very embarrassing and strange for a woman not to be able to take care of their children. What would outsiders think of her if she sent them to the elders instead of raising it? Even those sisters-in-law would probably talk about it behind their backs. If she had to accompany Chu Heng to the county and could not take care of the child, it would be understandable. However, the truth was that she would probably still have to stay in the village, and the child would be raised by the Chu family's parents. "Do you think it's appropriate to do this?" She pursed her lips tightly. "It's suitable." Heng's voice was very cold, as if he was determined to do so. The Muyu was also a little angry. She was angry because she felt that this person did not give her basic respect. Her expression was still calm, but her voice became tough. "Something like this has never happened in the village. It's best not to do something that will make people laugh at you." She did not like to do such troublesome things. If there were any problems, they could always be solved by laying it out. There was no need to deliberately target them. Laughter now is temporary. It will be a real joke if you continue to be like this when you grow up. Chu Heng insisted. He did not dare to be at ease with Madame The, and he could not be at ease either. This time, he was just testing the waters. It was also for the good of the two children. He had no choice but to do this. Even if it would affect his reputation in the future, it was better than ruining the two children. The Muyu looked at him. The man's face was determined. If it was someone unrelated, they would actually admire him. At least, the two children had a father who was willing to take responsibility for them. Their future was not bad. Although this person's temper was not very good, at least he was a responsible person. However, she was being despised even though she was the children's mother. Are you sure? The Muyu sorted out her emotions and was no longer angry. Her strongest point had always been to adapt and find the most suitable position for herself. For example, if her husband, Hugh Heng, expressed disgust towards her, she would take it as it was and maintain a respectful relationship with him. The two children were related to this body by blood. Naturally, she could not ignore them. She just had to teach the two children well. As for the rest, there was no need to force it. Yes, Chu Heng replied. The Muyu did not say anything more and said, "Okay, I know. I'll tell them myself later." Chu Heng was a little surprised, as if he did not expect Madame V to agree so quickly. "Is there anything else?" the Muyu asked. Chu Heng always felt that he was very comfortable with Madame the today. Her words were very gentle, even if she was angry. Most importantly, she no longer made any stupid mistakes. It made people subconsciously want to get close to him. Chu Heng slapped himself in his heart. He was definitely blind today. Did he want to experience the mistakes that Madame Na made in his previous life again? Chu Heng suddenly stood up and left without saying a word. The Muyu was confused. She truly felt that the husband of the original host, this man called Chu Heng, was a little unpredictable and difficult to get along with. The Muyu did not want to think too much about it. She cleaned up the dishes on the table and went to the kitchen to wash them. After wiping her hands, he turned around and entered Chu Jin's room. "Mother?" When Chu Jin saw the Muyu come in, his hand that was holding the pen trembled and he hurriedly shoved the paper with wrong writings down. However, when he saw the Muyu's gentle face, he suddenly realized that this was his mother, not his father. He quickly sat down and breathed a sigh of relief. "How's the copying going?" The Muyu stood by the desk and took out the paper he had copied. The paper was folded into a square, and it was not white. It felt a little rough. This was the cheapest paper that Chu Heng had bought. The Muyu gave it to him and saw the huge and ugly words on it. She felt that this child still had a long way to go in practicing calligraphy. "Mother, I've already put in a lot of effort into writing. Don't you think I wrote it very well?" Chu Jin asked seriously. The Muyu was speechless. She hoped that he could forgive her for not being able to say such words. "At your age, it's already considered not bad." "Read it to me," the Muyu said. Chu Jin could not help but feel discouraged. "Mother, why are you here? Are you checking my homework?" "I'm tired. Mother will help you massage your wrist." The Muyu reached out and gently rubbed his wrist. Chu Jin was a little overwhelmed. Although he could easily get copper coins from his mother in the past, he had never been taken care of by his mother like this. For a moment, he felt a little uncomfortable. "Mother, are you not going to give me the copper coins after rubbing my hands?" Chu Jin could not help but ask. "It's not that you can't have copper coins, but your father told your mother not to give it to you." The Muyu deliberately said half of his sentence. "Mother, is it going to be like before, after father leaves?" Chu Jin asked anxiously. "Oh, I forgot to tell you something. Your father said that your handwriting is not good and you're not serious in your studies. You're wasting money, so you need to live with your grandparents in the future. Go to Grandpa and Grandma's house." "Isn't that Uncle's house?" The two elders of the Chu family, Chu Zhuan and Madame Liu, lived with the eldest son, Chu Lin's family. This was also the custom of the village. Yes, not bad. Your grandfather is very strict. You have to be obedient when you go over. "Mother, I'm not going." Chu Jin wailed and grabbed the Muyu's hand. He quickly said, "Mother, I will be obedient. Tell father that I won't go. I'll stay at home. I have my own home. Your father said that you can come back when you become better. The Muyu realized that this was a good opportunity to educate the two children, so she said, when we go to your grandfather's house, I'll go back to see you every day. If you can get a compliment from your grandfather, I will give you 10 copper coins. If you can get your father's praise, I'll reward you with 100 coins. Jin's eyes lit up when he heard so many copper coins. He could not help but drool. He even ignored the difficulty of this. Mother, are you serious? Not bad. The Muyu nodded. At the same time, she picked up her pen and copied 2 lines of words on a blank piece of paper. She handed it to him. In the future, you will follow this rule. Don't write nonsense on the paper. If your father is angry, even your mother can't protect you. Jin shook his head. Mother, can I not study? Studying is so tiring. Jin was a little lazy. The Muyu nodded. Sure, then you can go and farm. You will be responsible for 180 square feet of land for the time being. You will be like the elders in the village. You will use as much as the harvest from the land produces. In the future, I won't have to cook for you and buy clothes for you. All the harvest from your land will be yours. You can live however you want. No silver, no clothes, and no food? Jin felt as if the sky had collapsed. Moreover, it was 180 square feet of land. He knew that 180 square feet of land was big. If he wanted to grow food on the land, no matter how he felt, it was worse than studying. Jin shook his head. Mother, I'll study. I have to study. The Muyu glanced at him. The harvest of 180 square feet of land could be sold for 3 to 4 taels of silver a year. 3 or 4 taels. Jin swallowed his saliva. He was tempted when he thought that his little treasury had not exceeded this much, but, thinking of the hard work of getting off the ground, he immediately shook his head. No need, mother. I must study and be as powerful as my father. Well, all right. If you really can't study in the future, you should go farm, Jin froze. He did not expect that choosing to study was not the worst thing. The worst thing was that he would be thrown to farm at any time. Mother, we've already agreed. If I get Grandpa and Dad's praise, you have to give me copper coins. Jin thought that he had to save money. Only by saving money could he make a comeback. In the future, if he had money, he could be like his parents and pay for others to farm. It had to be said that the thinking of a lazy person could not be compared to that of a hard-working person. The Muyu did not care about his thoughts. He had a good mind, and as he grew up, he would not go astray. She did not stay any longer. She turned around and left the house to go to Ziluo's room. She knocked on the door and Ziluo quickly came over to open it. Seeing that it was her, she called out nervously, Mother, have you finished talking to Father? Can we go wash the dishes now? As she spoke, she looked towards the upper room. The Muyu was a little surprised. This child was surprisingly smart. I'm done. The dishes have been washed. I came over to talk to you. Ah, Mother, come in quickly. Ziluo quickly let the Muyu into the room. When the Muyu sat down, she stood in front of her and looked at her nervously. It's okay, sit down. Your cousin Xingsheng is looking for a husband now. Your father thinks that during this period of time, you'll stay in the old residence and follow your grandmother. Learn more so that you won't know anything when you grow up. What? Go to Grandpa and Grandma's house? Ziluo was as surprised as Jin. Mother, what about you? Mother will be at home. I'll visit you during the day. The Muyu could not just ignore the situation. She still had to take responsibility for the two children. Ziluo was relieved. Mother, you rest assured I'll study hard. I'll find free time to come back and do the chores at home. The Muyu did not refuse. She didn't want her child to feel that this was no longer her home. Pack a set of clothes and bring it over tomorrow. If you need anything, I'll send it to you. The Muyu thought about it. Although she could not refuse Xiaosheng's request, she could play some tricks. For example, she could find an excuse to go to the old residence. At the very least, she had to figure out the reason why Chu Heng did this. Perhaps it was not his idea. Chu Ziluo quickly waved her hand. "Mother, you don't have to send it to me. If I need anything, I can come back and get it myself." The Muyu did not want to argue with her. It was not that this child did not want her mother to care about her. She was just afraid of making the host angry like before. The Muyu thought that Lil Jin did not need anything else, but Xia Luo lacked a pair of shoes. The Muyu left the east wing and went straight back to her own room. It was a little dark in the house. It was not raining anymore. She found a rag and wiped the raindrops outside the window clean. The window was made of wood and looked very old. After a heavy rain, it would be soaked and moss would grow. It was very easy for it to mold. Wood would rot over the years. She first wiped off the moss and black mold on it and half opened the window. When the sky cleared up, she took it down and dried it. The Muyu was tidying up the house. At the same time, after Madame Liu finished her meal, her eldest daughter-in-law, Madame Zhang, cleaned up the dishes. She had something on her mind. She could not understand why her third son was thinking about divorce when he came back this time. Could it be that he had someone outside? Although she did not have much knowledge and experience, she also knew that scholars valued reputation the most. She did not really believe her son's words. He said that he would not marry again in the future. Obviously, it was impossible. Her son was only in his early 20s now. In the future, he will have a long life. Could he always stay alone in an empty room? She did not believe him, so she suspected that her son had done something wrong. However, after walking in the village for around 15 minutes, many villagers said something that made her frown. "Your scholar wife is quite close to Tang Rou. What do you mean?" Madame Liu asked without batting an eyelid. She still did not know what had happened, so she initially treated it as gossip. It was almost noon today when the Tang family's young lady and Yunlan entered the courtyard together. I saw that the Tang family's young lady's dress seemed to be unsightly, so I went over to inquire about the news. "Your scholar's wife went to buy meat, and Madame Wang deliberately tore off Tang Rou's dress. I don't know what she was doing, but your scholar's wife was kind, so she brought Tang Rou home. But there are also people who say that the two of them knew each other to help Tang Rou get rid of her stepmother. But speaking of which, Madame Wang is also ruthless. She tore Tang Rou's dress in public, which ruined her reputation." Wait. Madame Liu was stunned by the villagers' words. How could they say such disreputable things? Moreover, Madame V had a good relationship with Tang Rou. Were these villagers blind? Madame the wished that all the women in the village had nothing to do with Chu Heng. Tang Rou was a pretty girl in the village. Otherwise, they would not have raised her that well. They had always wanted Tang Rou to marry into a better family, such as the Liu family in the county. However, the Liu family's old master was an official. He had just retired. Even so, the Liu family's status was not something a peasant girl like Tang Rou could climb up to. Therefore, the Tang family's gaze fell on the scholars in the county. There were more than 10 students in the entire Nanchang County, but only 6 elementary scholars. 2 of them were over 50 years old. The remaining 4 had families, and 2 of them had opened schools in town. There were 4 books that could only be taught by 2 old scholars in the county school. The other elementary scholar was elementary scholar Huang from the neighboring village. He did not have any money-making jobs and was preparing to take the imperial examination like Chu Heng. However, he had a fierce wife at home and looked a little shabby. After calculating, was Chu Heng and those young students the only ones who were better off? Before this, the Tang family wanted to have a good relationship and find a suitable opportunity to marry Tang Rou to a scholar. Until 4 days ago, when Tang Rou suddenly proposed to marry Chu Heng and analyzed the benefits to Madame Wang and her father, Tang Zuiren. Tang Ro had said, "Father, Mother, I think marrying Xia Chuheng will have a better future. Firstly, Xia Chuheng has already passed the scholar examination. Those students might be digging for food in the fields for their entire lives. Father, could it be that you want to wait until I give birth to a son and hope that he will be clever? By then, you'll be close to 60. Besides, it's hard to say if my first child will be a son. Even if it's a son, it's hard to say if he can study." When Tang Xueran heard this, he felt uncomfortable. His 2 sons were not good at studying. He would never admit that it was because he was not smart. Therefore, when he heard this, he was instantly dissatisfied with the children he had thought highly of. Even though there were some who were not older than 20, people like Xie Chuheng, who was said to be the top scorer in the annual examinations, still failed to become a high scholar, despite being so outstanding. The chances of those children with average rankings getting higher grades would probably be even lower. Moreover, Xie Chuheng did not become a high scholar because of various accidents. In Tang Xueran's opinion, as long as he could go to the examination hall to take the examination, getting into the title was only a matter of time. He also tacitly agreed to Tang Ro wanting to marry Xie Chuheng. Of course, she had to be the only wife. As an elder, he definitely could not do the scheming, so he let his wife, Madame Wang, and Tang Ro go alone. Even if something happened, he would not lose face. Tang Xueran had a good idea, but he did not know that people often rose or fell together. If Madame Wang and Tang Ro's reputation were ruined, how could he be praised? It could only be said that the benefits had blinded his eyes. Back to Madame Liu. Madame Liu was shocked. "Tell me again, how did my 3rd daughter-in-law do it?" It was she who said that on account of the fact that we're all fellow villagers. She didn't want to cause trouble for her husband, so she agreed to provide embroidery thread. I was thinking, who would normally bother with Madame Wang? That person is obviously someone who doesn't care about money. Whoever gets involved with her will be in trouble. So I thought that your daughter-in-law has a good relationship with Tang Ro and that she was willing to help her. Madame Liu could not laugh anymore. She felt that Madame The had made a mistake this time. Everyone in the village knew Madame Wang's personality. Madame The should not have had anything to do with Tang Ro. She could have just rejected her. Even if she rejected Tang Ro, the villagers would only say that she was arrogant. However, what about it? Her son was the only scholar in the village for 20 years. With his fame, he didn't even need to kneel down to greet the magistrate. So what if he was a little arrogant in the village? However, she had no choice but to cover up for her daughter-in-law. She covered her mouth and laughed. "You guys don't know. Madame The heard from Maya Hang that the emperor of the imperial court loves the commoners. He is now a scholar, and all the honor is given by the emperor. Naturally, he has to look up to the emperor and treat the commoners well. So even though we know that Madame Wang shamelessly clung to her, Tang Roser's reputation as a girl was ruined by her stepmother. How pitiful. It's also because Madame Ne is kind. Madame Liu was not an ordinary country bumpkin. Her father used to be a merchant who sold goods in the town. However, in order to support his elder brother's studies, he sold his shop and returned to the countryside. It was precisely because it was difficult to support a scholar that she understood how difficult it was to rely on a scholar. Because of her father's expectations, she had studied a little since she was young and slowly gained knowledge. Later on, her son became an elementary scholar, so she paid more attention to her words and actions. All of this came from the influence her father had on her family since she was young. Therefore, after hearing Madame Liu's words, the villagers instantly felt that Chu Hang was very outstanding. Madame Liu was very good at talking, and they also felt that Tang Ro was lucky that she could get help from Madame The. The news spread quickly in the village. The moment Madame Liu stepped out and spoke, the news spread to the entire village. For a moment they all felt that if Chu Heng were to get into the high scholar examination again, it would be even harder for them to build a good relationship with him in the future. This would cause some relatives to come knocking on their doors, wanting to build a good relationship with him. This was another story for the future. Seeing that she had achieved her goal and regained their reputation, Madame Liu calmly walked toward Chu Heng's house without saying a word. There was still some distance to Chu Heng's house when she saw Tong Ro. Tong Ro also saw her and immediately smiled, subconsciously walking over. Madame Liu saw that there were people working around her, so she only snorted in her heart. She ignored Tong Ro and walked past her. Tang Rose's expression froze. She clenched her fists by her sides. She immediately called out to Madame Liu and smiled lightly. "Aunt, you're here to see Brother Chu, right?" When Madame Liu heard Tong Ro call Chu, she subconsciously frowned. Logically speaking, it was right for the family to call him brother. Even relatives could call him brother. However, outsiders could not. Outsiders either called him by his name or addressed him respectfully. For example, most of the villagers called Chu Xing Scholar Chu. Madame Liu did not stand on ceremony when it came to this point. "Ah, Ro, although your family and my family are from the same village, we are not relatives. I'm afraid you're calling Chung wrongly." Tang Rose's smile froze on her face. She had not expected Madame Liu to use these words to block her, even calling her a village girl who did not know anything. She was saying this because she wanted to get closer to Chu Heng in secret. Madame Liu was too unreasonable. If it was not for the fact that she was Chu Heng's mother, she would not have been willing to talk to her. Tang Ro took a few deep breaths to control her anger. "Aunt, I understand. Yes, I'm relieved that you know. I'm doing this for your own good. Since there's nothing else, I'll leave first." Madame Liu lightly patted Tong Rose's shoulder. Her eyes filled with meaning. Her words stopped Tong Ro from continuing. She smiled politely and left. Tang Rose secretly clenched her fists and did not stop Madame Liu. Instead, she frowned. She felt that Madame Liu was not easy to get along with. If she wanted to get the position of Chu Heng's wife, she would have to hide it from her. Madame Liu walked far away, not even looking back. She felt that Tang Ro was not worth worrying about. Tang Ro just wanted to climb up to the high branch to Chu Heng. Madame Liu felt that although her son was not as good as a high scholar, he should still have the pride of a scholar. Of course, this should be pride and not arrogance. When she arrived at Chu Heng's house, she saw that the courtyard was clean and tidy. Madame Liu nodded her head in satisfaction. She knocked on the door. After a while, the door opened. It was Chu Ziluo. "Ziluo, where's your mother?" Madame Liu was not surprised that it was Chu Ziluo. She knew that her granddaughter was the most sensible. It was just that Madame Liu was a little stupid and did not know how to cherish this child. "My mother is making shoes," answered Chu Ziluo. "Making shoes? I'll go in and take a look." Madame Siet, you knew that Madame the liked to slack off, but she cherished Chu Heng very much. There were flaws in her character, but it was not too serious. It was just a small problem. Madame de was usually afraid of her and could not change. Therefore, Madame Liu's only regret was that she could not get a reasonable wife for her third son. However, Madame Liu was a woman herself and knew the difficulties of women, so she would not chase Madame the away. Since Madame the could not be chased away, she could only be taught. Therefore, Madame the was most afraid of Chu Liushi. Chu Ziluo was in the courtyard and she quickly called out to her mother. Madame Liu knew that she was reminding Madame the, but she did not say anything. The courtyard was not big. In just 2 or 3 steps, she arrived at the door of the east wing. The Muyu knew when Madame Liu entered the courtyard. She did not get up immediately. but put the last needle in her hand and put the shoe that she had made with great difficulty into the sewing basket before she got up to welcome her. "Mother, you're here?" The Muyu naturally welcomed Chu Liushi in, then turned around and said, "Mother, sit down first. I'll get you some tea." As she spoke, she went straight into the kitchen and brewed some tea. She brought it over and even took a teacup. Madame Liu looked at the shoes in her sewing basket. Judging from the size, it was rare to see that they were not made for her son, but for Ziluo. What was wrong with Madame that today? Has she been awakened? Just as Madame Liu was feeling puzzled, the Muyu returned. The Muyu was a little suspicious under her stare, but she did not show it on her face. After pouring her a cup of tea, she sat down and asked, "Mother, should I tell my husband that you're here?" "No need. I'm just here to talk to you." Madame Liu pointed at the shoes in the sewing basket and asked, "Did you make these shoes for Ziluo?" "Yes. Ziluo will have to trouble you to teach her the rules in the future. A pair of shoes is not enough. I didn't think it through in the past, but now that I know it's not easy for children, I want to learn well from you in the future." The Muyu's voice was sincere. Madame Liu could not even speak about her doubts. She asked suspiciously, "Are you really willing to learn from me? Do you still know that you were wrong?" If she had been surprised to see the Muyu making shoes for Ziluo, she thought that she was hallucinating when she heard the Muyu say that he wanted to learn from her and that he had done something wrong. She could not believe it. The bad habits of Madame Liu were brought over from her maternal family. Since it was said to be a bad habit, how could he suddenly change it? Therefore, Madame Liu began to suspect that the Muyu was up to no good. The Muyu noticed the change in her expression and knew that she did not believe her. She felt a little helpless. The Chu family had a deep impression of the original host's stupidity in the past. Now that she said that she had come to her senses, it was normal that the other party did not want to believe her. She did not want to pretend, so she just laid her cards on the table. Anyway, no one knew that she had changed her core. Using enlightenment as an excuse was the most appropriate. The Muyu was a little suspicious under her stare, but she did not show it on her face. After pouring her a cup of tea, she sat down and asked, "Mother, should I tell my husband that you're here?" "No need. I'm just here to talk to you." Madame Liu pointed at the shoes in the sewing basket and asked, "Did you make these shoes for Ziluo?" "Yes. Ziluo will have to trouble you to teach her the rules in the future. A pair of shoes is not enough. I didn't think it through in the past, but now that I know it's not easy for children, I want to learn well from you in the future." The Muyu's voice was sincere. Madame Liu could not even speak about her doubts. She asked suspiciously, "Are you really willing to learn from me? Do you still know that you were wrong?" If she had been surprised to see the Muyu making shoes for Ziluo, she thought that she was hallucinating when she heard the Muyu say that he wanted to learn from her and that he had done something wrong. She could not believe it. The bad habits of Madame Liu were brought over from her maternal family. Since it was said to be a bad habit, how could he suddenly change it? Therefore, Madame Liu began to suspect that the Muyu was up to no good. The Muyu noticed the change in her expression and knew that she did not believe her. She felt a little helpless. The Chu family had a deep impression of the original host's stupidity in the past. Now that she said that she had come to her senses, it was normal that the other party did not want to believe her. She did not want to pretend, so she just laid her cards on the table. Anyway, no one knew that she had changed her core. Using enlightenment as an excuse was the most appropriate. Chu Yun was older than all the younger brothers, and she was 8 years older than the third brother, Chu Hung. As such, Chu Yun had raised Chu Hung since he was young. She had always protected her younger brother the most. However, Madame Yu's stupidity made her very unhappy. Every time she returned to speak to Madame The, she would not be polite. Some time ago, on the birthday of the head of the Chu family, Chu Juan, Chu Yun returned home and found out that Madame Thad had abused Chu Ziluo and had taken their belongings to her mother's house. Not only did she personally go to Madame Via and give her a good scolding, but she also did not allow Madame Via to interfere in Xie Zhuan's birthday for the entire day. If outsiders saw it, they would gossip even more. Originally, with Madame Liu in the middle, nothing happened. Who knew that Xie Yuyon's 6-year-old son, Wang Dinglin, would spill the beans when he heard the conversation in the room and was asked about it when he walked out? This caused the news to spread. Many people in the village said that the Chu family was not satisfied with the daughter-in-law, Madame the. It was said that there were many idle people in the village, and it was rare for them to come up with a topic. How could they be willing to just go over like this? There were those jealous people who actually talked about divorce. When Madame the heard this, she was furious. In the end, Madame Liu and Chu Jiwen also heard about this. Madame Liu went straight to the Chu family's patriarch, who was also Chu Zhuan's elder brother, Chu Yonghua, and explained this matter to him. He had to personally call Chu Yon back to apologize and break this rumor. Chu Yon had apologized, but she had privately told Madame V that she had apologized for not disciplining her son well, not for saying those wrong words. When Madame Da heard this, she was angry and afraid. She had a bad temper and immediately rebuked Chu Yun on the spot, saying that she was meddling in other people's business. Afterwards, she was worried that Chu Hung would really divorce her. Madame Vez was very satisfied with her current life. She naturally knew what would happen if she was divorced. Therefore, she went to the temple to pray to the Buddha and drink the fragrant gray water. These things had only been in her mind for a while, and it had happened in the blink of an eye. After hearing her words, Madame Liu's expression was a little subtle. She also thought of her eldest daughter, Shi Yung. She did not know what to say for a long time. She was really dissatisfied with the stupid things that Madame Yi had done previously. It was also true that her eldest daughter was too radical. It seemed that she could not help either. Madame, I know that what Yun did at your father's birthday banquet was wrong. Mother should indeed apologize to you on behalf of Yun, but you were also in the wrong. If you are willing to change, Mother will be very happy. Of course, Yun must change too. You two are family. How can you treat each other like enemies? Although the Muyu felt that her original host was indeed courting death, she had lost her life. It was not too much to ask for a sincere apology from the two of them. Mother, I understand what you mean. You can see what happens to me in the future. I hope you can keep your promise too. The Muyu lowered her eyes and spoke in a gentle voice, but Madame Liu could hear the hint in her words. Although Madame Liu felt a little uncomfortable being suspected of favoring her daughter, she did not say anything and nodded in agreement. She was indeed biased toward her daughter, but she had to give her daughter-in-law a face. Giving face to her daughter-in-law was giving face to her son. Madame Liu knew this very well. Naturally, I will do as I say. After hearing Madame Liu's words, the Muyu was relieved. Only by seeking justice for the original host could she live without guilt. After saying this, Madame Liu lowered her head and saw the Muyu slowly making shoes. Although the speed was slow, the needlework was more meticulous than before. It was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort. Madame Liu also nodded in her heart, thinking that perhaps her third daughter-in-law was really going to change. By the way, when I walked over today, I heard the gossip in the village. Madame Liu suddenly thought of Tangro and asked. She subconsciously looked at the Muyu's reaction. Mother, what did the villagers say? The Muyu asked. Madame Liu wanted to ask the Muyu what she was thinking, but she was asked back. Her gossipy nature made her unable to hold back and tell the Muyu all the rumors in the village. The Muyu frowned when he heard that. She regretted what she had done earlier. Mother, I've troubled you again. The Muyu apologized immediately. She never liked to cause trouble for others, but from Madame Muyu's words. She realized that the original host's understanding of this world was not comprehensive. For example, if the host were to encounter this, she would probably think that the villagers were jealous of her and would not care about it. However, Madame Lu's words made the Muyu wake up. The original host did not have much knowledge, so her current knowledge was limited. However, she could not make such a mistake again. If Chu Hang really managed to pass the High Scholar examination in the future, there would probably be more rules. If she acted recklessly now, there would probably be some hidden dangers in the future. It was the first time that Madame Liu received the Muyu's apology. She felt very awkward and was not used to it. She felt that it was as rare as red rain from the sky. At the same time, she felt very comfortable. Although she was thinking for the Muyu and for her son, the Muyu never understood her feelings and even made stupid mistakes repeatedly previously. The Muyu's words made Madame Liu feel extremely comfortable. She felt embarrassed to be too strict with her. "I'm satisfied that you can understand the reason why I'm doing this." Madame Liu gently patted the Muyu's hand. She said this very sincerely. "Mom, I wasn't thoughtful enough. I agreed to bring Tongro back because I wanted to see what she was planning to do to me. I didn't consider the villagers' opinions and helped Tongro instead. Wait for the next chapter."